tell the supervisor or something.
Yep. We're ready to get going? Okay. First, we have the agenda to approve. Is there anything that management wants to be added or changed to the agenda? Any member have something? Then a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're done with that. Any comments from the public? No one's asking to speak. So we'll move on. The next agenda item is the policy process. This is a discussion only, and Sarah is going to take this over for us.
So I just want to review with the board what our current process is for bringing policies to the board. So what generally happens is staff will identify a need, or the board member will identify a need. We will go back and see if we have any policies that have been previously adopted throughout the years. If we don't find anything and we still feel that there is a need for a formal policy to be adopted by the board, we would bring an outline of that information to the appropriate committee. We've been working on finance policies, so we would bring them to the finance committee. We talk about the need in the outline, we get input from the members of the finance committee. Then we would go back and we draft some language. We then bring that language to the next meeting of that particular committee. We take input, make adjustments as necessary, and then bring that final draft version to the next level of committee. In this case would be the executive board. The executive board would also provide input as they see fit, as needed. And then at that point, it either come back for more revisions and then come back to the finance committee, back to the executive committee, and then it would go on to the full board. So just to review very briefly that is currently what we do. The conversations from last month highlighted that we probably need to do some things possibly differently, possibly not. We want to take a look at what I am doing right now is going through all of the, with Amy's help and Amy's help, all of the policies that we currently have in our files online that were board adopted, and having a log, essentially a log of the policies, and then going through to the documents that we call a policy that may not actually be a board-approved policy. So differentiating between what we are calling a policy, procedure, guideline, instruction, versus something that was adopted formally by resolution by the board. So when we have those lists, then that'll be our basis for coming back to this board and having a review all of that information and make sure that the policies that may have been adopted 15 years ago, make sure that they're still necessary, and just kind of go through the revision process again as needed. And then where there are other documents that have been more instructions or guidance or guidelines, they're not board adopted as an actual policy, we need to stop doing that, calling them that, call them what they are, and then we'll also be able to see a need for potentially any actual new policies. So that's what we're working on now. Again, that was based on the conversation from last month, which I think was very helpful to help us understand kind of where the gaps are. And if you want to fill in on any of the other process pieces, but I just want to make sure that everyone was aware of what we currently do and how we're looking to change that going forward.
I think that nothing I need to add to that. I did notice that we have some public that came in, and after we had started, I wanted to see if anyone in that group wanted to speak. If not, we will just keep moving on. before, the next agenda item is discussion on the policies and potential board action, which I hope happens. The policies that were put on the table a month ago. There is a not quite so simple process to taking them off the table, which isn't hard, but to their amendment process. And what I got from Thomas Maloney, our attorney, is a cheat sheet on how we go about this that I'd like to read to you first so that you know exactly what's coming up. So the first step is a motion to take the items off the table that's seconded and undebatable, majority vote. Then there is a motion to present amendments that has to be made from the floor that would require a second, is debatable, and a majority vote on that to present amendments. The next step is that since these are primary amendments, and they're primary amendments because they apply directly to the wording of the main motion, that means that no more than one primary amendment piece or sentence can be addressed at a time, which requires that the amendment for that sentence that's having words added or deleted, a motion is made to accept that amendment. It's seconded, it is debatable, and it's voted on. And as Robert's Rule says, no more than one primary amendment is permitted to be pending at one time, but any number can be considered in succession. So what we'll do is we'll take motions from the floor on the amendments that you will be receiving, I think, from Amy, that were presented by Ken, and we'll just work our way through them. Once we get done with all of them, then we need a motion to amend the main motion with the amendments. I know. That gets seconded. It's a simple majority vote. We take it. If that passes, then the main motion is amended with the amendments. If it doesn't, then the original motion, as is, comes back up for a vote, up or down. It has already been made and seconded, so it does not need to have that process again. It is debatable, but needs a simple majority. So, if we got that, we're all set. Simple. So to start with, I need a motion from someone to take the motion that was tabled off the table. And a second. Okay.
Sorry, who made that motion?
Leslie?
I can't hear very well.
I can't either. I've got a cold and my ears are.
Lynn was the second. Is, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes to bring the motions off the table. Now, have the amendments been passed around? They're coming. Everybody got them? So now, we need a motion from the floor to discuss the first, the first policy would be the, does it matter?
I don't think it matters.
We'll start with the restricted, assigned, and unrestricted reserve policy. And I need a motion from someone to move the first set of added words.
I would move that motion to adopt the restricted and the two reserves.
Well,
Be
it
it
would,
resolved by the Board of Commissioners, adopt the accounting, reporting, auditing. and
wait.
controls.
No.
Not that?
No, what we have to do is, in that, if you flip to the next page, you'll see that it says budget and expenditures.
So the motion is,
So we need a motion to accept the words.
Oh, not the old copy. we-
No, not the old copy.
Packet. Okay,
No,
this is confusing.
I
What about
know,
the amendments?
I know. We're talking about the amendments only.
So the one that says accounting that starts, or the one
It
that
starts
says restricted?
restricted assigned.
Okay.
So if you go to the second page, you'll see that under budgets and expenditures,
Yeah.
it says, which will include the annual budget approved, et cetera. We need a motion to add those words to that sentence.
I may be dumb, but I'm just not. May I have a point of order and ask a question?
Absolutely.
The original one that we had in our packet where it has two policy adoption changes,
Right.
and then the thing that I was starting to read,
Yes.
we're not gonna do it that way.
Well,
We're gonna go through the whole document and do each one individually?
if you want to make amendments to the motion that was brought to the floor last month that was tabled, then we have to go through them and approve them, the amendments one at a time. But you can also just move the original motion without amendments if you'd like.
I would-
Point of order, Chair. The main motion has already been moved, as I understand it.
Right, that's
We
what
are
I-
accepting amendments at this
Correct.
point.
So.
So I will
Wait,
move,
we're not somebody has to move an amendment first,
correct,
or they can vote on, somebody can make a motion to have a vote on the original motion, which was on the floor and tabled. Ken?
just to set the table. The motion was tabled last month,
Right.
along with a request that I prepare the amendments that I had described verbally at that meeting, which is what resulted in this red line.
To correct that, that's not what the minutes say. The minutes only tabled the motion to this meeting. There was no mention in it of amendments. But the amendments can be added now if you would like to make a motion, or the original motion can be moved as it was. Yes?
I have the floor back. Thank you. I'll bring the tape to the next meeting so we can see what actually happened. But
I looked.
I'll make the motion that we amend the restricted assigned and unrestricted reserve policy, capital reserves and budget expenditures section, to add the words, which will be included in the annual budget approved by the Board of Commissioners, after the word year at the end of the second sentence.
Second.
Any discussion? Has everybody found that portion? No discussions? Lynn, have you found it? It's in red. No discussion? Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's approved. Now, you need to go to, I need a motion for the next red word. Yes, Ken?
Make a motion that we amend the restricted, assigned, and unrestricted reserve policy, capital reserve section, budget and expenditures section, by replacing the word proposed with the word approved in the last sentence.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Believe me, this is not my idea. The process.
It's a process.
You can blame our attorney. I need a motion for the next set of red words on that page. Ken?
I move that we amend the restricted, assigned, and unrestricted reserve policy, biosolids reserve, budget and expenditure section by adding the words "for approval" between the word reserves and "as" in the first sentence.
Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, approved. I think that's it for that document. Ken?
So now you got to approve the document.
Yep. I need a motion to approve the restricted, assigned, and unrestricted reserve policy as amended.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes,
Discussion?
discussion, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, well, sorry, jumped ahead. Okay, my fault.
Discussion?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to vote against this because I don't believe that combining the capital funds all into one fund is in the best interest of the district, nor does it provide transparency. And that's, as we collect excess monies at the MRF, that money would go into a MRF future reserve, and those dollars would be available for expenditures at the MRF for future capital projects. And the same was true of drop-off centers and compost if we ever did it. And I think we're losing transparency here. And I brought this up at the financial board meetings and never really got a good answer for why it needs to be done. And I believe that we should still be keeping those capital reserve funds separate. If I spend money at the MRF, I would like it to be used, if there's excess money at the end of the year, used for projects at the MRF. And if we need money in another program, as we have done in other times, we have taken money out of somebody's reserve and paid it back over time. So, that's,
Lynn?
I'm also going to vote against the motion. I agree with everything that Alan said. And the board does have the authority to move funds from one account to another. The biggest thing is the transparency. Money should stay with the accounts where it's made or lost.
I'd like to point out to the board that if you agree and you do vote this down, this can come back, it can't come back exactly as is, or with the revisions that were approved, but it can come back in an altered form that would address the issues that were just brought up. So if you want to consider that, is there any more discussion about that, about separating out a portion of this? Yes, Bert?
I agree that we have always kept the projects separate And in some ways, that's important because there are known changes that we want to make, but it does sometimes takes, I'll say, 2 to 5 years to build up a fund so that we can make a change. And thereby, we need a tracking system that is associated with the activities.
Just point out, I do agree with Alan as far as the overall policy. The amendments I proposed were on the premise the policy is going to pass, in which case I think there were some other improvements needed. So I understand completely.
Yes,
I disagree with the comments about keeping them completely separate. I think that we tie our hands as an organization. We can keep visibility from where the funds come from, and we can also maintain a virtual balance if we need to, if we want that level of visibility. I'm worried that the implication is that if we keep them in separate accounts, that we're going to go ahead and tie both the board's and the staff's hands in how that money is spent in the future. And I think we want to retain as much flexibility because priorities and situations change dramatically over time. We're planning for the future, which is very uncertain. You know, the only one analogy that comes to mind here is that, you know, I'm thinking about when you're, donating to university, sometimes you'll have people will want to give money. Well, I want to build this library. I want to put a statue here. I want to do this. And inevitably, the president wants to have as many unrestricted funds as he can so that they can go ahead and invest that money where they feel it is appropriate. And I feel that we ought to be treating these capital funds in the same fashion.
does staff have anything to say about this?
I just want to make sure that everyone is clear that we don't have actual separate bank accounts, right? So we have one fund, it's one bank account. The money is all in one place. Tim's right, we absolutely have the ability to virtually track or just continue to track through the accounting system. So that is not an issue. We can report that way as well. So we can certainly accomplish that goal. I think because there's so many changes happening amongst various programs that we may want to maintain some of that flexibility. However, again, through the budget, the board always approves the capital plan regardless every year. And so you're going to see where we think we're going to have the need, not just for the current fiscal year that we're proposing, but going out 2 to 5 years as well. So there will continue to be that level of awareness and transparency. So, Deke, I don't know if you had any other clarification?
No, I mean, when this came up, I asked the Finance Committee, and to Alan's point, there was discussion. We can keep it formally or informally, any way. And you're right, Lynn, you can move it anytime you want. It is assigned. So what that means, if you're assigning it at the department level and we need to use money somewhere, we just come back here and ask, and it requires a motion here and we move money. Or you just approve the budget and do it. It really doesn't matter to me. Both can be done quite easily. It probably will not be done in the accounting system, it will be done separately, but you can see in the report that you get how much money is in each account now. So it would work either way.
Any more comments, discussion? So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And ask for account of the balance.
Yes, I didn't
Roll
hear
call.
I didn't hear some people vote. So, can we have a
Amy, do
roll
you have a
call?
list of roll call?
So you just had the names for Essex, Jericho.
Well, I'm not sure that I heard everyone,
I'm voting for Jericho.
I voted aye. You did. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry for,
Well, we'd still like a roll call.
so just do it by town? Yes, please. Bolton?
Aye.
Burlington?
Aye.
Charlotte? Colchester?
Aye.
Essex Town?
Nope.
Essex Village?
Nope.
Heinsberg?
No.
Huntington is not here. Jericho?
Aye.
No.
Bert,
Bert, only the primary can vote.
All right.
I didn't know Leslie was here. I didn't-
Milton,
Yes?
Richmond,
Yes.
Shelburne.
Aye.
South Burlington's not here, we'll say George, no Underhill, Westford,
Yes.
Williston, or Winooski.
Williston and Winooski,
Those are,
both are here.
who did you say? Yes. And Williston. Williston and Winooski, yes.
The motion passes.
Okay. Motion passes. I'm glad we did that. Next is the accounting, reporting, auditing, and internal control policy. So, we need a motion, I think next is on page 3.
They both were,
They're both on the tables, they both came off at the same time. So we need a motion to add the first two words to that sentence.
You want me to walk through them again?
You have to, yeah.
Perfect.
Move that we amend the accounting, reporting, auditing, and internal controls policy, Board of Commissioners reporting section by adding the words additional or between request and specialty in the last paragraph.
A second, any discussion? Yes,
For clarification, the language of additional or specialty is, there's a difference there in terms of what is additional versus what is specialty? Could that be clarified?
Ken?
Sure. Specialty reports, as I understand it from brief discussions with the staff, there are certain reports that the commissioners request one time only. I'm suggesting that there may be other reports that we want on a periodic basis or a couple of times. So I do see a difference between the two.
Thank you.
Any other? Yeah, Tim?
I see it as unnecessary.
Any other comments? All those in favor of adding those words? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
One nay. Motion passes. Adding those words. Next. Yes, Ken?
Move that we amend the accounting, reporting, auditing, internal controls policy by adding a sentence at the end of the Board of Commissioners reporting section stating, individual commissioners may request additional financial data through the executive director, which information shall be provided in the manner the executive director determines to meet the request in the most effective manner.
Second. Discussion. Yes, Tim?
I strongly disagree with adding this language. I think it's well-intentioned. Unfortunately, I think what we need to consider the worst-case scenario here of a kind of a nefarious board member who makes it the executive director's full-time job to go ahead and answer information requests. Right? That's the way this wording is open to that. You could literally, pummel 20 a day to the executive director and it says they shall respond. And so I think that if the wording of the ability to request a special report is fine, and the executive director can go ahead and respond to that in the due course of business, and if a board member is dissatisfied with how the executive director is responding, then that issue can be addressed separately to the executive board. But this should absolutely, positively not be added to this policy.
Ken?
Yeah, I was actually torn on this amendment when I proposed it, but in discussions I had with the executive director and the chair, and even today, I was basically told that the only way an individual commissioner can get data, can request information, is if this board approves them doing so. So it creates a situation where, as a representative of 10,000 people in Milton, I cannot ask staff to do anything unless this commission authorizes it to be done, and I do not believe that's appropriate. If my select board asks me for information, I need to be able to go to the staff and get that information. short of submitting a FOIA request. I don't think any of us want to be in a position where our member communities feel like they don't have access to information without going through some sort of legal process. I'm not necessarily wed to this language, but I am not willing to put Milton subservient to the desires of the board as a whole if we feel there's information we need as a member. And my understanding of the process right now is that is the case.
Approximately a year, maybe a year and a half ago, we had the same discussion. In that instance, we were talking about the drop-off center in Heinsberg, and it was brought up by Paul that individual commissioners are not supposed to ask staff of CSWD for any special work or anything like that. It had to go through the board. And I believe that that's what the board's policy is, Ken, now. So.
I'm suggesting an amendment, so if that's the board's desire to keep.
In this one instance, it wouldn't apply to the other things.
Sure.
Can I hear you loud and clear about I think it would be beneficial to have individual board members have the ability to go ahead and request information. I feel that those words shall be provided is a loophole that could make this very problematic, albeit in very rare circumstances. I mean, I don't, but I think if we strike that and we just, if you would be willing to modify the language to say that if the board member, if the executive director feels that it can be provided, and they'll do their best to do it, something to that effect, then I would be willing to allow that path. But the way that it's worded right now, I can't agree to it.
I have a couple of observations on this. If this is passed in this wording, this would open up the executive manager to being subject to the will of every single commissioner, that you could have every one of us asking for a different special report. And that could be a problem, but a bigger issue is the charter for CSWD that is approved by the state, can only be amended by the state legislature. And in it, it states, to enter into, this is the Board of Commissioners, the board, not individuals, to enter into management contracts with any person or persons for the management of the district facilities for such periods or period of time and under such compensation and other items and conditions as shall be deemed advisable by the district board. Now, what that says is that only the board can give instructions to the manager here. So since we cannot alter the charter without going through the legislature, I think that this is ill-advised. Just to point out that our attorney isn't here at the moment. He's away on vacation. Well-deserved, I'm sure. If this is passed and it turns out that it is a violation of this state's charter, that would make this one piece null and void. So we may end up there, just to give you a heads up on this. Ken?
That's an interpretation I've never seen, and I do municipal agencies all day, every day. But I would like the legal opinion from our attorney as to whether, in fact, the charter actually says that none of us can effectively talk to staff without violating the charter.
That's not what we're saying at all.
Essentially what you were describing
No, I
there.
did not say talk. I said you cannot instruct or demand, which is a request for this for this data.
And asking for
Only
financial information is considered to be instruction.
can be done through the board. So what's, your wording is on the table. This will be looked at by the attorney if it is passed. And from my experience on having been on several boards, including national, there's never been an instance I have seen where a director has authority to instruct the manager to do work for them. I'm happy to let this go to the attorney if this does get passed, and then we'll just see what happens when we come back next month.
Sorry, one more comment, if I may,
Yes,
Chair.
Ken?
I would ask that the staff be prepared if this does fail, which it appears it's going to. Be prepared to answer this at the board meeting with our select board. This will be a topic of conversation as part of your budget presentation.
I'm sure I should be prepared.
Do you think that question should come to the board, Ken, as opposed to staff? I mean, because staff's just moving in the direction that the board asked them.
It's a board issue, right?
The executive director is going to be attending a select board meeting at the end of May, asking them to approve the budget. And I'm going to be sitting in that meeting telling them that I feel as a commissioner, my hands are tied in trying to answer questions for them. And the board, my select board, is going to have to understand the restrictions that it appears leadership of this commission is putting on individual members. And I don't believe Milton understood, and I know for 10 years being on this commission previously, it was not the approach that unless I was the chair, the vice chair, or a member of one of the committees, I really couldn't interact with staff without getting approval from the rest of the commission. And that's the way I'm feeling right now. And this past month of trying to get these amendments that the commission asked me to prepare when you tabled the policies last month has been a nightmare. Just getting to the point where I can present these to the commissioners. And so I'm feeling like the structure here is designed to make sure I can't ask questions or propose changes without being as stubborn as I am. I mean, a normal person would have walked away. And frankly, I'm considering telling the select board in Milton, don't reappoint me because this is too much of a nightmare. So that's, and the interpretation, every time I ask a question, the interpretation of the rules is, well, you can't do that. You need to have board approval, you need to have the chair approve it, it's too much work for the staff. That's not a public municipal organization that I've been involved with anywhere else before. And I'm finding it very frustrating.
But the charter wasn't something that was developed by, I think you may be the only one in the room that may have been one of the early members of Lynn may have been on the board when the charter came around. I mean, it was here when I first joined the board. I've been here, I don't know, 15 years now. And I have always felt that I could not directly go to staff and ask a question. I had to go really to the chair of the board and ask if I could ask the executive director a question. And I felt that since the first day I've been on the board, and it hasn't hampered my ability to get information, I don't believe.
Leslie?
Yeah, I wanted to also say that my experience, just because I'm on the finance committee as an example, doesn't mean that I can directly go to Deke or even to Sarah. On one or two occasions, I've made a boo-boo and sent Sarah an email without copying Paul, and I've been corrected, that any requests for information should go through the chair as chair. I think the difference is that we are a group, we are a district, we are not an individual municipality, and I don't think you can look at the functioning of a district that is comprised of, 18 towns, is not the same thing as operating a single municipality. That's point one. Point two is I don't understand if my select board said, well, we want to know this, and this about the Richmond Drop-Off Center or these fees or something else, what the barrier is to just getting on the agenda to the next board meeting and saying, I am asking the board to direct the executive directors to apply this information for. I don't understand why that's an insuperable hurdle. Seems to me that if we all understand what the process is, then we learn to use that process. I am concerned about overburdening an executive director being pecked to death by ducks. Not that this particular group of individuals might do this, but you're writing a policy in general for the future. And that is indeed, as I think Tim said, that is a possibility. You can get a maverick member of your board someday who will, I mean, I've seen it in other contexts, who will just continuously badger. And I think we want to protect our executive director from that.
Just for Ken's information, back when we were discussing the drop-off center, and Paul instructed me that I was not to talk to Brian or Dan and maybe Lee about Heinsberg's drop-off center, I was put back a little bit. It didn't seem the correct decorum. But after that, working with Sarah and emailing, if I did email Brian and copying to Sarah, the system worked well for me. And I am guessing in this situation, if you bring your concerns to Sarah, they will be answered from past experience.
Yes, Ken?
My point is, I can't bring my concerns to Sarah without going through the board. But I mean,
No,
unless there are other comments, I move the question.
We need a vote to move the question. Is there a second to move it?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
This is on moving the question.
Moving the question. All those in favor of amending these words, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion doesn't pass.
Do you want to roll?
Well, we'll do a roll call just to make this safe so that Ken can bring it back to Milton.
Bolton? Burlington?
No.
Colchester?
Aye.
Essex Town? Essex Village?
Aye.
Heinsberg?
No,
Jericho?
No.
Milton?
Yes.
Richmond?
No.
Shelburne?
No.
Westford?
No?
Williston? No. Winooski? No.
Does it pass? No? Okay.
Yeah, I always screw everything up.
Learned that lesson.
Okay, that amendment to the wording does not pass. On to the next. Yes, Ken?
I'll move we amend the accounting, reporting, auditing, and internal controls policy auditing section by adding the words, "The finance committee shall oversee the annual audit," and "the," between the words "the" and "auditor" in the second sentence.
Any discussion?
I have a question
Yes.
to the maker. Ken, what is your intent? As a member of the Finance Committee, supervising an audit seems to me like a rather daunting prospect. So I want to understand your intent there.
If I may answer, my understanding is that the finance committee presently is the only entity that deals with the auditors. Through staff and the finance committee, the audit is basically completed and the audit is presented to the finance committee. My only intent in these changes, the combined changes, this amendment and the ones to follow, was to say that we, as a commission, have essentially handed off the day-to-day financial management of the district to the finance committee. We presented with the warrants, but they're approved by the finance committee. That's all handled at the committee level. I feel it's important that the commission as a whole receive the audit once a year. That should be presented to us, not presented to a finance committee, and then we have to make some sort of
But
secondary motion.
that's not the language I'm referring to. I'm referring to the prior language, the language that says, "The Finance Committee shall oversee the annual audit." I want to know what your intent is there, what,
The intent was to make it clear that the actual conducting of the audit is still done with staff, with the input of the finance committee. The Finance committee will manage that process, that's a better word for you. But the audit, when it's done, would be presented to the commission as a whole.
okay, I want to say again, I've got no problem with the second one, but right now, we can only vote on bit by bit. And I'm struggling with this as being an enormous undertaking for a volunteer finance committee. To me, supervising an audit is almost a full-time job when the audit is going on. And I'm about to undergo an audit supervise the audit for my company, and I won't be able to do both. So, to be charged with something that I cannot realistically discharge correctly is troubling to me, and maybe there's some better language than oversee the audit. I don't know what the right language might be, but I just ask that maybe some other commissioner would have a better idea.
My belief is we're doing it right now, Leslie, when the auditor comes in and they find something during the audit, which they really haven't in the last couple of years, but staff brings it to the finance committee at a meeting and talks about the issues that are there. And I think that's overseeing the facts and the things that are there. I mean, we're not gonna be there as the auditor looks at the books or anything else. It says oversee, not supervise. And in my mind, I think the finance committee already is doing that, and this just puts it into concrete.
Okay, I just wanted to understand that language to get clarity on what that language
That is
is
the intent.
intended to be. Right.
The motion was not intended to really change the role of finance committee at all. It was just to make it clear that the preparation of the audit happens under your auspices.
Jim?
It's hard to debate these one at a time because they really do go together. I guess my feeling is that the financial controls that are in place for the district are very strong. The process has worked very well, and I don't see a need for a change here. And if there is a problem that comes up in the auditing process, it's certainly going to get surfaced to the board, but there's no need for a negative report. And so I think this is superfluous.
Did you have something else to say, Leslie? Leslie? Did
I'm
you have
sorry, what?
something else to say?
No.
Is there anything in the charter that is specific to how the audit is conducted?
That's a good question.
I don't have that portion.
You don't have the portion?
No. You have it, Amy?
Board of Commissioners shall cause an audit of all district accounts to be performed annually by an independent professional accounting firm or a certified public accountant.
So it does not seem to impede Ken's motion.
Call the question.
Second.
All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Opposed? The vote to amend the words as just presented by Ken? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 1 nay. Motion passes. Those words are included. Next.
I move that we amend the accounting, reporting, auditing, and internal controls policy auditing section by striking the words, "Board may also request a meeting with," between the words "the" and "auditor" in the second sentence.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
This is being done also now, I mean, has been ever since day one, but this is the concrete.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we did it. Now we need to,
No, you have to do the next bit. This is ridiculous, because you're forced to take things out of context.
okay, next. Ken?
Move that we amend the accounting, reporting, auditing, and internal controls policy auditing section by adding the words, "shall present the audit to the Board of Commissioners annually" at the end of that section.
Second.
Discussion? Yes.
Not on this, but I feel a need to make a comment that this whole process highlights what I said last month.
Well, we're discussing.
All right.
We're discussing this right now. Any discussion on the wording? Yes.
How many pages does the report have to be? Minimum of a half an hour or 45 minutes?
This is to present, it says, shall present the audit to the Board of Commissioners annually,
So the full 35 pages at a board meeting.
which I think has been the standard practice.
We've always done that, Ken. The auditors come and comment.
And actually is a responsibility of this commission to view it, be able to ask the auditors questions directly, and then to approve the audit. So it can be time-consuming, or it can just zip right through, which is what has happened in the past. But there's nothing really out of order with this, to our past practices. Any other discussion? All those in favor of amending this to include those words? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we have done it. Now we have reached the point where the next motion is to approve the amended policies, and the motion from last month was policies together, both of these. A motion to approve both policies as amended.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Done. The policies are approved as amended. So, now, we get to the minutes. A motion to approve.
Approve the minutes of March 27th.
Seconded.
Any amendments or corrections?
Doug was here last March 27th, it was done.
Did you get that?
Doug was here, what, the 27th?
Bryn Oakleaf, her name is misspelled in these minutes. There's no E on the end of her first name. I think she would appreciate a correct spelling.
I'm sure she would, yes.
And it's throughout the document, it's not just on the first page.
Our apologies. An embarrassment. Any other? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Okay, Deke, Finance Committee report?
Warrants and balances, as flowed, we had a significantly high cash flow last month. We got a $106,000 grant, which can help. The month before was a very negative cash flow because we bought the baler and spent money, so this is not unusual that the unrestricted or unassigned cash balance. But other than that, the bank balances are as noted, and at this point, every check written for over $5,000 is also noted, which is about 80 or plus % of the warrants.
Any comments or questions of Deke? Now, the biggie, the budget.
Yes, the budget, okay. So, in your packet, you have, starting with the purple cover, you've got the main highlights. Most of this is what is going to your select boards and city councils. Not everything, you do have a bit more detail than provided there. All of the detail is on our website under financial information. Every program's detail page is there. So we do have that available for everyone. This year's budget, I feel like we've been talking about different components of what has been coming for quite a while. Just in the conversations that we've been having about organics, about the MRF, about the docks, and about just the changes and some of the volatility in the different areas that we've been experiencing. I feel like we've been talking about a lot of this for all year. So in some sense, that's good, but in some sense, I want to make sure that we don't breeze over something that you want to focus on. So as we go through this, and what Deke and I are going to do, we're going to go through the presentation, pick out the major changes, the highlights of the big pieces, and then we will be happy to answer any questions. We only have 17 or 18 or so slides, so I think we'll probably want to go through it all the way through if we can, and keep some of the questions for the end if that's okay. If there's something really out of whack, then obviously stop us there, but.
Just the first noted major change, we updated the chart of accounts for the first time, a wholesale, every year you update the chart of accounts. We did a wholesale evaluation. We eliminated other and miscellaneous. We've got far more consistency in how everybody is using codes than we had in the previous format. I've restated, going back to the extent that I could, the history. Where two accounts came together, it was very easy to put them together. Where an account like other had 3 or 4 different things in it, it was impossible to take it apart. So you will see some high percentages in some areas that have nothing more to do with the fact that some items have been moved from one account to a different account as we move to the new chart. Overall, that hasn't impacted anything overall, but it has impacted certainly miscellaneous and other, and some of the categories we use to get rid of those at the request of the Finance Committee, which I think strengthens the budget. So that's overall. I'm going to let Sarah go through the strategic issues, and then I'll go through the numbers.
Great, thank you. So also included in the packets that will be going to your select boards will be my executive director letter. I've written these for each year that I've had a budget here with the district, and I've gotten great feedback from your select boards and your city councils because they like being able to see everything kind of in one spot as a higher level. I do apologize for the length of this year's letter. I'd like to try to keep it to 1.5 pages, and it is long, but we've done a lot of different things this year, and we're proposing doing a lot of things next year. So the first big thing we wanted to talk about was the organics diversion facilities, so formerly known as Green Mountain Compost. And the big change is the new name, and that is, again, as we've been talking about, reflecting our move towards away from making compost as our primary function and to managing organics and managing food scraps. So that'll be the first big thing that I talk with the select boards about is that paradigm shift that we're making. And again, the key there is proposing to make compost in the amount that we can match our carbon, or our leaf and yard, which is our main source of carbon. We are looking at, obviously, with the Act 148 finalizing next year, continuing to see a rise in food scraps, so we know we'll be needing to do something with the remainder. And as we talked about over the past few months, bringing a couple of options to you for managing the remainder of the food scraps, mainly transferring. But those changes, as we mentioned last month, will be brought to you over the next few months, so that you have an opportunity to discuss, debate, learn more about that, and select a path. So that is coming. Next big change that we're talking about is the materials recovery facility. And the changes here, I did want to mention that we are raising the tip fee on the organics diversion facility as well. So, but you're going to, I think, Deacon is going to talk about that. So at the MRF, the more things are not really changing, there is still continued volatility across the markets. We've seen some stabilization, but not nearly to the point that we had wanted to. And I don't think we'll be seeing that stabilization for another 2 years. It's going to continue to be volatile as particularly the paper markets shake out and some of the capacity comes online going forward. So because that volatility will continue, we did feel the need to raise the tip fee again this year. And we were hoping to not have to. We were hoping that things would stabilize enough to keep it where it was currently, but that's not the case. As the board is aware, what we did last year to manage and mitigate that was to not add contribution to our capital reserve fund, and we were okay because we had some good years previous, so we were able to pay for the baler and out of the capital reserve, and it was fine. This year, we need to start building that back up. So we are going to be raising the tip fee to $65 a ton on July 1. We are still below the Northeast New England regional average, so we'll want to continue to look at that. But because the paper markets are fairly stable, even though we're still paying, they haven't done that big dip, we feel that we can continue to add to the capital fund with the $65. The expenses are quite different in the MRF budget this time around than it has been previously, and that is directly related to the renegotiation of the contract that we had with our operator, Casella. And previously, the way that the contract had been structured was we were paying a significantly discounted processing fee. We were paying probably about 50 to 60% below what the actual cost of operation was. And the way that Casella made that up was in their revenue share on the other side of the sale of the materials. So they were able to basically recoup their additional operating expenses through their profits and then also continue to make a profit. And as the markets declined, they were not able to cover their operating costs. So essentially what we're doing is we are making sure that those operating costs are being covered, and that is the bulk of that expense. And it was, now we're actually seeing the cost of running the MRF in the budget. It had not been in the budget per se. We're now seeing that there. So you're going to see that big dollar amount, and it's a big amount, and it's going to seem like that came out of nowhere, but that's where it came from. It is actually reflecting the operating costs that we're paying to Casella to run the facility. So we're also looking at, the increase at the MRF severely impacts the docks. So the docks also pay the tip fee at the MRF, and so their budget has been dramatically impacted by that increase as well. And Deke will go over that too. Into the drop-off center. So we have put money in this year's budget, in the fiscal 20 budget, for a new drop-off center at Heinsberg. We received 6 responses to our RFP for survey and design work. Brian is working through those right now and finalizing some of those numbers. So the intent is to come back to this board in June, no later than June, with the cost of what it would be to rebuild in Heinsberg. But we have put that money back into, this money in this current fiscal year that we will not be spending, but we have just moved that dollar amount into fiscal '20. We're also proposing some fee increases at the docks. Bag fees will be going up slightly. Some special waste items will be going up as well. And a new change, this is I think probably in some ways the biggest change, other than the recycling fee, but this is cost, but this is related to that, is introducing a fee per trip for recyclables. The way that it's currently structured is anyone who brings us trash and recycling or organics pays one fee. If you're bringing us just recycling, you pay nothing. If you're bringing just organics food scraps, you pay $1.50 a bucket. So in essence, we've hidden the cost of the recycling and the food scraps in that cost of the bag. And we've been talking for a few years about kind of pulling that apart, unbundling those costs to be able to show the actual cost of the trash, the actual cost of the recycling, the actual cost of the food scraps. We were thinking of doing that this year, but realized that we did not have the data that we needed to be able to say, this portion of the bag is trash, this portion of the bag is recycling, this portion is food scraps. So instead, we are introducing a fee for recycling-only trips. So if you're bringing all three, you still would just pay your one bag fee, so go up about 25 cents or 50 cents depending on the size of the bag. But if you're only bringing recycling, then we are proposing now charging $2 per trip. So not $2 per bucket or $2 per bag, but per trip. And that is new this year. And we expect to have a lot of conversation at the select board level on that. And we are not proposing any increase to the solid waste management fee. That is essentially the tax on trash that gets disposed of either at Coventry or at other facilities outside of Vermont. It is currently $27 a ton, and because the trash disposed does keep going up, we continue to be able to not only meet our budgeted amounts, but also to take in more than we've budgeted, so that money in excess goes into the reserve, the solid waste management fee reserve fund. So we continue to add to that, which is why we don't propose raising that, essentially that tax on trash. That's, like the rate stabilization funds are not projected to be needed at all this year. Next, please. And I want to talk a little bit too about the change to the organizational structure. And this is a conversation that I think you all had with Tom years ago as well, and we had the conversation with me last year as a big part of the discussion. And so what we've decided to do is, I currently have 9 direct reports, and as you can imagine, that does take a bit of time, so we're reducing my direct reports to 5. Adding a position, Director of Operations, and this person would essentially, anything that is moving material in and out, so your drop-off centers, your organics, biosolids, the environmental depot, the MRF, and then adding paint, maintenance, or engineering and closed landfill. Anything that deals with the materials management, proposing having this person oversee those functions. Having them take over all of the functions in 1 year is not a good way to keep someone employed for long. So proposing to phase that in over 3 years, focusing first on the docks and on organics, and then maintenance and engineering and closed landfill, but really focusing on the docks and organics first. Those are the big moving pieces, more obviously with organics. I'm proposing keeping the MRF and biosolids separate for now, because I see the value in keeping that team, Josh and Jen, continuing to work together. They've been doing a great job. I want to continue to have them work through the project, so that is going to stay behind and have that project continue to work through. And as well, so the environmental depot, for now, is being moved temporarily for a year or two over to our compliance director. Josh Hesty, grew up in that business, so that is his most recent work experience, so it's been a great fit so far, and we're working on that transition this year. So Josh will oversee that beginning in July 1 as well. And so where Jen has moved, because we pretty much busted apart.
You might want to specify which Josh.
Sure, Josh, Josh Esty is the complaints. Josh, Tyler is managing the MRF and the biosolids. So Josh Esty is getting the depot and the paint program. He is our current compliance director, and Josh Tyler will maintain the MRF and the biosolids under Jen Holliday. Jen Holliday is currently the director for the environmental depot and product stewardship policy, and she is moving to lead the outreach education, marketing, communications, adding EPR, which is product stewardship, under that as well, because it's mainly policy related first. And she's, again, going to be doing a little bit of double duty, maintaining that partnership with Josh Tyler on the MRF and moving that program forward. So she's moving over to head that department.
So, I'll let Lance, I'm going to hit just the highlights of the packet going forward. Revenue is increasing a great deal, 13%, over FY19 budget. It's $750,000 is just MRF tip fee. There's a small, there's also an increase in material sales we're projecting, so $1 million of the 1.497 is really is all happening in the MRF. Together, the docks, because of the increase, both, as Sarah explained, the per bag, the small increases in special waste and the recycling, those numbers are going up about 387,000, and the solid waste management fee increase over the FY19 budget is 472,000. Now, let me explain that a bit, because that looks like a lot of money, but it's not that much over what we actually collected in the calendar year. We just projected very, very few tons budget to budget, and this year, instead of saying, well, the budget last year had so many tons, let's add or subtract from the budget, we looked at what was real, and it's only about 3% over where we actually were. So that's completely in the ton projection and not in the fee at all. And that's just an ability to correct for what we actually experienced versus that budget to budget comparison that Leslie is breaking us out of the habit of doing. So that's where the big pieces of revenue are. There are some drops in revenue as well. Organics is going to be dropping because they're not in the second half. Next year they're not going to do as many material sales. The bag products rents went down a tad as well because we're projecting we've already asked one property owner to leave, and when the resolution of the MOU with Burlington takes place, those folks are out. So there are some revenues going down, but there's some really heavy hitters going very high. So that's revenue. 2 pages of expenses. First, cost of goods sold, which is new in this year's budget. I don't think we had it last year, but it's a traditional piece of the budget, refers to anything that we buy that the customer leaves with. So if paint, it's all the stuff we put in the paint, all the buckets and so forth. Compost, it's anything we buy to put in the compost. When we sell bins, it's our cost of the bins. So that's moved out of expenses into cost of goods sold. That's gone down significantly because compost is not making as many products, and so therefore that is going down because they're not going to need to buy as much stuff. Expenses themselves are up 10%. The MRF processing fee is $752,000. And the dock recycling fees, the processing fee is what we pay to the operator. That's going up $750,000. What the dock has to pay to the recycling facility is going up $120,000. So the lion's share of what's happening is expenses really in 2 numbers. And that covers the vast majority of that. A couple of other things. Organics is net income is going down by $18,000. That's the revenue less their cost of goods sold, less their expenses. And that's due to that material sale that I told we spoke about. The other big piece is biosolids moved from 5 municipalities this year. They're going to 4 municipalities, so both their revenue and expenses are down slightly. And finally, the closed landfill, and this is not, it's not terribly significant, it's a bit of an issue this year, but it's something that as we look through our restricted policy, we have to pay attention to this, and I'm just flagging closed landfill because those expenses are going up and down a lot from year to year, and so it becomes difficult to tell how much you need to cover 30 years. For those of you who haven't been in on this, when we closed the landfill 25 years ago, we put enough money aside to take care of it year to year so that every year, instead of spending solid waste management fee to clean it, we use the reserves that we put aside at the beginning to maintain it. And every year we have to report how much money do we have and how much money do we think it's going to cost going forward, so we make sure that we have enough money. I'm just flagging this right now because it has been a little volatile and PFAs and so forth. There's a number of things, so I'm flagging this not because it's important, but because we'll be hearing from it again, and so this is a good time to mention it. Do you want to take questions?
Question. In terms of the 30-year period, we have discussed that we really don't believe it's going to end at 30 years. Do you have any information as to, at this point, what happens after 30 years, or are we planning to put something aside, I'll say, as a 5-year or a 10-year buffer beyond that amount?
Yeah, there's nothing that I'm aware of in this year's legislature. There was some potential language last year that didn't pass about, and I think I've mentioned this to the board before, requiring perpetual care of these closed landfills, that it did not appear this year to go anywhere. But again, that fund is required by federal law. That's not just a state requirement, right? So we need to make sure that we're not only preparing for normal, everyday, you have to keep the grass mowed, you need to, pump out the leachate, et cetera.
We will still continue to test the waters and
Sure,
monitor it, that's for sure.
I can't imagine that we would, okay, and we're done. However, the state is aware that legally, federally, we probably could. So I think, what Deke is saying is that as of right now, we have plenty of money in there for the remainder of our obligation. However, should the state be pushing the PFAS issue, should we have a catastrophic slope failure? There are any number of things that could throw that out of whack. And you always want to have, I think, more in that fund than less. So right now, we're okay. And we'll just keep monitoring and talking to the state about, be aware of the potential issues associated with any perpetual care conversation about these landfills, so.
Okay.
Are we still getting electricity off of that?
Bert, we're going to move forward with this
Okay,
budget,
go ahead.
if you don't mind.
Have we found PFAS at the landfill?
They're everywhere.
I know, but have we found any out there in our testing?
Josh, can you speak to
We
that?
tested the our monitoring wells for the groundwater standard of 25 parts per trillion, and at the time, it was 5 individual PFA constituents, and we were under on all 5.
I just wouldn't bring it up in a public hearing other than what we've already done tonight. But don't bring PFAS up in a select board meeting.
Well, understood. I mean, it is something that could significantly impact the
There's no
budget.
requirement right now to test for it. There may be next
There
year.
there is a requirement to test for it. There's no requirement to put in any treatment, but there is a requirement to test.
It just.
Okay.
To talk about stuff.
Another subject. Continue.
All right, let me just go through the staffing changes. There's a lot of moving around. The new positions we're asking for, full-time director of operations. We're looking to add 400 hours to the accountant position, which would bring us to a half-time accountant in finance. 208 hours in a compliance officer. So this particular one is, we have a 32-hour-a-week compliance officer, but with Josh Estee moving over, we wanted to put a few extra hours in that backfill in compliance in case we needed some assistance there. Outreach and Communications is looking for just a summer intern to help with events at 200 hours. And the docs are looking for 1,200 hours to assist with leave coverage as folks are leaving. We have reduced this year the sales coordinator and all of the temp staff in organics diversion are out of the budget for next year, reducing that budget by 2.1 FTEs. And lest I be accused of speaking out of school, the sales coordinator's last day is Friday. That's so that's not something we're broadcasting before we've told the sales coordinator. So for benefits, we have projected a 10% increase in health insurance, but we have had last year a very significant increase in people taking the health insurance and opting out. So our health insurance expenses are pretty level, I think, this year, and it's impossible to tell what is going to happen next year. That's, who knows if people take your insurance or don't, and if you get new employees, it can, because it's expensive, it can vary, but that's where we're planning right now. So those are the big, on the expense side, when you go below the line, there's allocations. For those of you who haven't been through the allocations, the full cost, so all the money we spend in admin, compliance, engineering, finance, outreach and communications, and special projects. So those are all the programs that have no individual revenue for services. Those all get spread among the programs that have revenue for services. So they're fully allocated. In the past, last year we fully allocated. 2 years ago, it was partially. So the solid waste management fee, when you see it applied, never gets applied to those programs. Those programs gets charged to the revenue programs, and the revenue programs is where the solid waste management fee or reserves take up. Allocations, the way we do it is we estimate, all staff estimate, and however we do, how much time we think we're going to spend next year on any program. So right now you'll see organics is up because we all know we're going to spend a significant amount of time in that organics program. The MRF is up. That's going to change from year to year. And that's why it's below the line, so you can see your net income from operations and then how the allocations are working. When we did this exercise, about half of our time in the admin and the support programs are not directly in service to any program. They're district level programs, but we still allocated everything. So when you see an overhead at $750,000 to a $2 million budget and you go, oh my, that's not the cost of the overhead, it's the cost of the entire support programs. So that's how that works. And moving into the capital plan. And by the way, when you look at allocations district-wide, they're always zero. They have to be, okay? Because if you take money out of here and you pay for it over here, that line's always going to be zero. So that's just the way it goes. So capital plans. The capital plan is not an authorization. When you approve a capital plan tonight, it doesn't mean that on the 1st of July we're going to order all that stuff and start working and off we go. So it's not an authorization to spend. It's a direction we believe we're heading. We are having 2 really heavy investment years. We planned on spending $1.775 million last year, and this budget is $2 million. That's huge outlay of cash. And the way the program works is you'll have these years where it's heavy, and that reserve, the amount you have in the bank is going to go down, and then on years we're not doing so much, we recover. And so these are years we've been putting net in, more in than we've been drawing down, and we're going to reverse that this year. So every year the operating programs out of their operating budget fund this back. The major investments this year really are the Heinsberg dock and organics. So I'm going to let Sarah talk a little, whoops, sorry, about, well, there we go. Just exactly what the projects are.
So, again, as Steve mentioned, that just when we're talking about the capital projects, that anything that is under $50,000, I can approve the spending on, but anything 50 to 100,000 goes to the executive committee for approval. Anything over $100,000 comes to you. So that has to be approved by the full board. So, and again, it's just, like Dick said, it's directional. And some of the strategy is, as we said, still emerging, particularly around organics. So we have some estimations of things that we could go, should we take path A or path B. So we've put both in there. You'll see definite column. These are projects that we have very certainty that we're going to attack, and then possible. So we've done that a little bit differently this year to indicate, again, the uncertainty, but to give you some scope for the potential universe of what could be spent if you go completely into, move everything from possible into definite. And that's just, again, we want to bring back kind of the best options to you. And I don't think we've had to recast a budget, or if we have, it's been a very long time since we've had to. We may need to, it would depend, but that was where we were hoping to have to be able to hedge the need to recast by providing both possible and definite projects. But again, that will be bringing back that capital plan, that budget to you for another look after the path for organics has been determined. Then we'll be able to say, okay, here's what it is. But I don't think it'll need a recast, but just flagging that for you. And the same thing with Heinsberg. I mean, that will be coming back to you shortly in the near term.
So I'm just referring to your packet. Assigned funds are all of those funds, like the community cleanup fund, the rate stabilization funds. Those are moving. They're in your packet. They're fairly stable. The dock stabilization rate increase, the rate stabilization, beg your pardon, will be zeroed out this year, and we will likely not contribute next year, pending our ability to siphon out exactly what that bag of trash costs and how we can portion that across. We will increase the solid waste management fee. I believe we're going to do that this year as well. I'm just closing March. Stabilization, sorry. The solid waste management, waste stabilization is projected to increase, and the landfill post-closure is projected to have more money than needed. So, and that presumes that presumes a status quo. So in those fund equities, those are all of the places you've assigned funds, and other than the solid waste management fee rate stabilization, things are pretty stable there. Finally, pricing, which was the last page in your document, just the MRF, again, is up $10. The dock, we can talk as listed in your packet on the last page if you want. I'm sure you've seen it. The 18-gallon and the 45-gallon bags are going up 50 cents. The middle bag, the 33-gallon bag, is going up 50 cents. And there's a number of changes. There was an error. Food scraps are going from $52 to $60. There was an error in putting this out, and it had to do with how things were listed, but it shows a decrease in the price of small mattresses and box springs. We actually want to increase that $1. So that just got reversed in your packet. And so essentially, I mean, that's where we are. We're most of what's happening is happening just the same as it happened last year, and we're just getting hammered with recycling fees. And that's driving a good deal of where our budget is moving.
Now questions. You can unleash them. Leslie.
So I think one of the things that will disturb the select boards are these fee increases. And the most visible one will be the change in the fees at the drop-off centers. I would just like to know, does our outreach operation doing anything to start giving people flyers in assuming this budget passes? Will there be flyers being handed out well in advance of implementation so that it doesn't come as a total shock to dock users? And if so, I think that at every point where you're talking about fee increases, you need to marry that immediately with why and what the district is doing to educate the community and get the community in support of it. And you need to I think we need to reassure the select boards that we're on top of the public education piece of this. And that doesn't come out of this, you see. So I just want to underline that I think that's vitally important, because this is just, nobody out there is paying attention to the solid waste market the way we have to, and that public education pieces.
Yes, and absolutely. And the way that we've handled, because we've already sent out notices for potential increases for the MRF and for compost, just again to give those customers a bit of a lead time. We're required to give Casella 45 days notice, so we like to give the haulers at least 2 months so that they can then work that into their pricing. So what we would do something similar for the docks, to give as long of a heads up as we can. Luckily, that means 2 months. So we can say, let them know, starting again pending the approval by this board, we can begin early May to start saying, here's what you'll see on July 1. So that is, we always want to give as much notice as we can. So in this case, that's 60 days. Tim?
A question, do we need a motion before we can open discussion on this issue?
I don't think that's really necessary. You can ask questions now.
And then the other, the level, what's the level of granularity that are we being asked thumbs up or thumbs down to approve or not approve the budget? Or are we going to get down into the line item detail about somebody's salary in a specific drop-off center?
Will be to a request for a motion to approve the budget as presented. Yes.
So because we want to incentivize recycling and composting over landfill, why are we choosing to increase those tip fees but not landfilling fees?
So, great question. So, and that will be a question that I'll receive at, I am sure, at most of the select boards and city councils. So that has long been part of the philosophy for not just us, but everyone in the industry. Anytime you want to change behavior, you want to incentivize it. And we've been doing recycling in Chittenden County mandatory since 1992 or 3. And it's part of the culture. It's part of what we do, who we are. The need to incentivize doesn't seem to still be there. People are going to recycle. Most of our users, or a lot of our users at the docks, they bring the big 3. They bring us all of their waste. What we want to do is be transparent about the costs of everything. As we just ran over, recycling is not free. And that has been the message that's been perpetuated by everyone in the industry since recycling really took hold in the early 90s, that don't worry, it's free. It's not free. We're just choosing not to charge you at the moment. There's always been a cost associated. We're trying to tease that out. And that's why we're starting with the group that has been essentially been subsidized by the folks who do bring us trash, recycling, and food scraps. They're paying for the folks who don't, who have other options or choose to do something else with their food scraps and their trash. So they're because it's so embedded in the culture, there no longer really seems to be that need for perpetuating the idea that recycling is free.
That makes sense to me for the drop-off centers. I'm wondering more about the ton per ton.
So it's interesting, the $27 for the solid waste management fee is also embedded in the pricing of the bags. So it's something where we probably could tease that out, but it's a per ton fee, and then we're charging per bag. We could do that. It would be quite the exercise, and I don't think it would translate. You know, I think people would say, oh, all right, well, so what? It's a nickel, big deal. It wouldn't have the impact, right? Haulers are charged that, again, at the landfill when they bring the material there for disposal. They say it's from Chittenden County, then they get the bill, and then they pay us. That's the impact. So customers who subscribe could feel that. But again, we've gone back and forth on it.
Well, we increased the solid waste management fee, the big trucks, 5 years ago. And we expected it to bring in money for a couple of years, and then we'd be kind of level that year, and then we'd spend that 2 years. What has happened with the increase in trash every year, the money continues to grow. But be assured that we are collecting more than the amount of money that is being spent disposing of the solid waste through the solid waste management fee. We haven't been making that up at the drop-off centers, and so that's why the prices have increased at the drop-off centers, because they were sort of being subsidized.
I think if it were a per capita assessment, you would definitely see something, but it's not a direct line. The way it's done here is, I don't have a good answer for you.
No questions? Any other questions? Yes.
Michelle, I didn't get to participate this year, but I did last year, but I think there are a lot of people here who are maybe newer to the process. Can you give a quick overview of how the budget is prepared, when the process starts, how many meetings there are, who participates?
Actually, management starts the process considerably earlier than the finance committee gets involved. They start in November, October,
Yeah, October, November. Yeah, the charter says that we have to bring a preliminary budget to the board by December 1. So we, back that up at the end of October, early November, just to take kind of a gut check to say, do we foresee anything significant that's going to increase? Generally, we just kind of bump it up maybe 10% and say this is our estimate. And then we come back and we do the budget hearing that has to be done by January 31. But after we've given that preliminary budget, what we've been doing is we've actually been meeting as a finance committee much more regularly than just for the budget. So this year in particular, we had many meetings. I forget how many exactly as far as even before the budget process started. So in November and December, Deke will send out or try to work through. It was a little tricky this year because we were transitioning to a new system. But in normal everyday years, she would send out a sheet or the budget from last year to budget managers. They would fill in any changes. We would consolidate that. We would present that to the finance committee, and we chunk the meetings. So we have 3 or 4 meetings of the finance committee, and we do several programs in one go, and then they go line by line, page by page as necessary. Some things don't tend to change very much year to year. Utilities, are going to go up 3%, 5%, whatever it might be. Fuel might go up a little bit. What we focus on are the projects and the people. So we've put a lot of time and effort into that. So it's a series of 4 to 5, sometimes 6, depending on the need, meetings of the finance committee, and then it comes to the exec board and is reviewed with the exec board at a higher level than the line by line, and then it comes here.
And I can tell you that members of the finance committee have been very aggressive about questioning expenses. So what you see is actually probably pared down from what the proposals were for each of these budget meetings. Every document that the Finance Committee saw and the Executive Committee saw regarding the budget was posted on the website for every commissioner to see. So none of this has occurred, along with the minutes that have been, for some meetings, quite lengthy, about what we discussed, who said what, and why we made the decisions that we did. This is absolutely not a pass-through, the budget that you see. Does that answer your question, Tim?
Was Alan there?
He was.
He
Well, I gotta
wa-
know.
Yes, he was. Yes, and we were very aware of his presence in a very good way. You know, all of these challenges to this budget, and really a great help and insight by Leslie, too. You know, that these budgets are truly poked and prodded to the benefit of the district and with the assistance and response of management.
Just, you know, I did not get to participate in the process this year, but we made a lot of changes last year, and we're kind of building the plane as it rolled down the runway in terms of format and structure, and, you know, you guys did a fantastic job of doing that. But I'm just, in terms of looking at the format and the structure and the changes that you've made, I'm extremely impressed, and it really looks like it's a very, very good tool, both from a budgeting perspective and from a tracking and management perspective going forward.
The goal was to really streamline it and to make it easier to read, so that anyone, particularly folks who are not financial wizards and are not steeped in this every day, can at least follow through and see that it makes some sense. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would recommend that you put the column headings on each page, so you don't have to go back 4 pages to see that they're not there.
Yeah, your print instructions didn't come out quite right.
I will fix that.
Can I entertain a motion for the,
We do have a resolution. It's on the board, on the screen there. And you've got it in your,
would someone like to?
I would move that the Board of Commissioners approve the fiscal year 20 operating. Yeah, okay then.
So,
I can read it. Be it resolved by the CSWD Board of Commissioners approves the proposed fiscal 20 budget, and that it be submitted to the member legislative bodies for approval as presented, amended to note $1 increase in small mattress and box spring fee. Who was the first move? Alan, thank you.
any further discussion? In that case, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
It's recommended to new commissioners that you attend the budget hearing with the staff that night.
And Amy is finalizing that schedule as we speak. So we can send that out we can send out the preliminary schedule by the end of the week, so you have a heads up. We're waiting on 3 or 4 communities to finalize, but the rest are final, so we will send that schedule around this week.
Okay, so the budget has approved. There is no other business. Are there any observations or questions on the program update?
Business? I forgot.
I'd like to comment on the other business.
Yes, we do have other business. Go ahead, yes.
I realize that a lot of people are a lot more knowledgeable than I am, but we're, in the process of considering building a new MRF, and the recycling market has been in turmoil the last year and a half, 2 years, whatever. I think that this board moving ahead should take consideration of maybe lobbying and Montpelier and everything so we can be more flexible in the items that are mandatory for recycling. Items that are mandatory for recycling and end up in the landfill anyway. I think that there's a better way to handle this as markets change. And in the future, we need to really start thinking about that. A lot of districts around the country are stopping recycling and just landfilling because of costs. So we need to start moving in that direction also. And I'm sure staff has been working on it, and other people are thinking about it. But I feel the urge to bring it up this evening so that it's maybe in the public record a little more.
It's a great point, and a lot of communities are looking towards different measures as far as recyclability. They're looking towards greenhouse gas effects, life cycle analyses. There are a lot of different approaches that are being looked at for where to focus on this issue. So you're absolutely right. The timing is good to be looking at different approaches, so absolutely. Makes sense. Thank you. Michelle, if you might, I would like to recognize one of our commissioners who is moving on to other things. Rob Green, our commissioner from Burlington, is leaving the city of Burlington after 31 years of service. He has been called home in a good way, up to take a job up in St. Albans. And I just wanted to thank Rob for his service. We've appreciated your voice on both the full board and on the executive committee. And as a fellow Rhode Islander, I felt a kin from the beginning, and I do appreciate, I know we've always appreciated your very practical advice. Your knowledge of equipment has been fantastic, and just having that connection with the city, the boots on the ground in the city has been wonderful. So thank you, Rob, for your service, and thank you,
It's a
and
pleasure.
congratulations.
Thank you.
You might want to introduce
So,
your...
my predecessor, Mr. Lee Perry, you know, he's a lot like me. He's a guy I worked his way up from the bottom and just boots on the ground kind of guy. You know, his big question was, he asked me if he was smart enough to do the job, and I said, you're a lot smarter than I am, so. He is a Colchester resident, but he works for the Burlington. He's gonna be the assistant director on the interim basis until all my leave's paid off and all that good stuff, and then he'll apply for the job and get the job and hopefully be a member of this board, so.
Welcome to Lee.
Welcome, Lee.
Welcome.
Yes, and we promise not to scare you too badly for the first few months. After that, all bets are off.
All time
Good job tonight.
Yes, because I have all time to start.
We made it through that, should be all right.
We do have members of the public in there. I don't know if you want to extend.
I did ask if they had anything to say, if they come in since.
Yeah, okay.
Is there anyone in the gallery that would like to make a comment before we adjourn here? You're all set? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Finding time to do the